My guest today is a former shark of Shark Tank. He ran business operations for the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets. He's a teacher at Harvard Business School. He founded the company RSE Ventures, a venture capital firm focused on early stage startup investing. He's also the best selling author of Burn the Boats, a self development book and framework on how to go after what you want by eliminating plan B and going after your dreams. Matt Higgins, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Matt, I appreciate you taking the time. I've been following you for years. Obviously, I first saw you on Shark Tank, and then I went over to Twitter and started following you, which is now X. And with your new amazing book, Burn the Boats, like I had to just talk to you. You're obviously not just another finance guy from New York City. You're a chronic overachiever. You want to give back and help people. Your story is absolutely amazing and inspiring to me. I want everybody to know where you came from, how you got there. Can you tell us your story and how you came to where you are right now?
Yeah, sure. No, you're right. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the book, part of it is I'm on a mission, but also in terms of we all get to decide how we show up in the world. And as somebody who has been through a ton to get here, I find it way more interesting to talk about where I came from than the byproduct of my hard work, and hopefully use that as a case study and an inspiration for those people who feel like the die is cast. So very quickly, grew up in Queens, grew up the product of a single mom. Grew up really in dirt poverty, eating government cheese from the USDA and selling flowers on street corners and selling handbags at flea markets and just hustling. And my mother had a whole series of disabilities that compounded over time, and I literally had to architect my way out of poverty, and I did it by burning the boats. I didn't have language for it. You know, when you're a kid and you're operating on intuition, or anyone out there who is trying to scratch their way out of a terrible situation, you don't necessarily have language, and you're operating more on intuition and instincts. And that's what I did. And so, in order to get myself out of that situation, I came up with a hack inspired by my mother, who didn't have any education, but as an adult went to college by getting her GED first. I decided if I could drop out of high school at 16, get a GED, I could enroll in college earlier. Why did that matter? Not because I was Doogie Howser or some little prodigy kid. It's because if you're a college student, anyone out there listening to this knows your income power is 2x of a high school student. And so I was like, I need to be a college student as soon as humanly possible. And where the burn the boats comes in is when I first came up with this crazy plan, everybody, of course, said it was out of my mind. And I realized I'm going to eventually submit to all this social pressure to conform, even though my instincts tell me the worst thing I could do right now is actually continue to go to high school, because I could tell my mother's health was fading. And so I sabotaged my education, failed every class but for typing, and I ended up going through with the plan. I dropped out of high school when I was 16, got my GED a couple weeks later, enrolled in Queens College. And that set in motion a very Forrest Gump like career. And what I believe is, the Matrix moment when he stops the bullet. I will borrow from Neo's brilliance. It was a moment when the bullets sort of slowed down, and I was like, wait a second. If I constantly put myself in situations where I don't have the answer perfectly mapped out, I will be able to summon an extra level of commitment that'll enable me to get to these extraordinary places. And so once you do it once, you burn the boats once, and you're like, oh damn, like that worked. Now I'm in high school. Now I'm in college. Now I'm on the debate team. I am. And I decide to tie that all together. We can get into this book, Burn the Boats, which is a basically not a blueprint, because it's not written in a prescriptive, like, let me lecture you. It's storytelling narrative to inspire you that on the other side of your drudgery and plan B is a path to achieve your plan A, but it requires total, complete surrender to your true purpose.
Matt, I love the book. I've listened to it twice and I even read it once, and I don't read books. So, can you give us an idea of what inspired you to write this book?
I talk about this in a book. It's actually I tried to put words to this idea of what does it take to have an insight that can be worth millions, or at a minimum your freedom. Like, where do you find these insights? And I call them proprietary insights. They're insights that are born based upon your personal experience, where you live, where you grew up, what you see, maybe your crappy job that you discount, but within that job, you see a better way of doing things, right? My first proprietary insight was being actually around my mom, who didn't have any education, and yet I watched her get a GED and then she went to college. That's what made me think, like, wait, why don't I do what she did inadvertently because of her circumstances? She didn't have an opportunity to get an education. Why don't I do that on purpose, but achieve the same result, only achieve it earlier? So she inspired it, but it is the first illustration in the book of this broader idea of proprietary insights. I believe that everybody listening right now has within their life, an insight that could either lead to a new company or a new promotion or move them closer to their goal, whether it's personal financial freedom, whatever the hell it is. And in the book, I try to show this idea of proprietary insights and how it plays out. So to give a simple example, I always use Airbnb, right? Here's some kid, Brian Chesky, sleeps on a futon in 2009 and has this insight of, like, I think other people might want to rent this crappy couch. And, like, now I would never have thought that. I think people are going to steal my shit, but he had his own insight, right? And then now it's $100 billion company, not an invention like what Shark Tank teaches you. And then I have this woman in the book, Michelle Cordero Grant, who worked at Victoria's Secret and she did their marketing. She was a VP of marketing, but she kept feeling alienated from her own work product, saying, like, our marketing seems to be a highly sexualized view of what men think women should look like, but not necessarily what women. Maybe there's room for a woman focused or brand. And she launches a company called Lively that she sells for $100 million. And so I want to demonstrate through the course of this book this point that all of us have within us, this proprietary insight that we might be overlooking because we devalue our own stream of data that runs through us every single day.
Matt, what do you think is preventing people from actually going after their dreams? From your research, what is it, what did it tell you in terms of like what everybody is like scared of? Is it losing a paycheck? Is it because they don't think their idea is good enough? Is it because they don't know where to start? Like, tell me from your research, like, what is it that's holding most people back from going all in on their dreams?
Well, there are a few reasons. Like, let's set aside the people who don't want to, right? Like, I'm very content. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't want that. But let's only talk to the ones who do. There are these different. I've seen recurring fact patterns. I try to address in a book, generally, that I find hold people back. One of them is this bias towards incrementalism, right? We are led to believe that in order for us to have permission to the next thing, we must do the last thing that immediately precedes it and forms a logical sequence. In other words, if I want to create my own, VC firm, I first have to have been number two at someone else's VC firm. Before I got to be number two, I had to be a director. Before that, I had to go to a top Ivy League school, right? Like, there are these rules, and the reason why they are, and not to be all Oliver Stone-ish, because it's more subtle than that, but the people in positions of power want to organize things efficiently, and that's why we have titles in corporations. If you work at a lawyer for 8 years and use a highlighter in a basement, you get to be a partner one day, right? Like, you're let in. And so our parents pass down these rules. Our institutions reinforce these rules. Same way with me when I decided I was going to drop out. The people whose entire job it is to prop up the system, of course, they're going to reflexively be repulsed by that. Like, no, Matt, you need a high school degree. And so I think that's one. It's a bias towards incrementalism instead of what I call a step change. Another one, very important, which for me was important, is lack of a sense of belonging / imposter syndrome / shame. So I grew up in abject poverty. So first time I ever went on the set of Shark Tank and I'm with Mark Cuban, like, I felt like he could see right through me to that kid in that Roach Motel. So a lot of us self-select out of ambition because we feel the die is cast by either a bad decision I made, by my upbringing, and if you think about who puts you in a box, is it your boss or is it you? Is it your spouse or is it you? We put ourselves in a box. Very little is there. Very, very, very rarely is someone else truly the agent of our oppression. We are the own agents of our oppression. And so the word boat in my book is a metaphor. It was used literally back in Cortez and going back time. Ironically, he had just a better marketing campaign because he actually predates him dramatically. In fact, it has way more of an Asian origin. There's a battle, epic battle in 206 BC in China, where literally burned the boats, killed 100,000 of the enemy too, buried them alive. Not a good story either. But nonetheless, my point is the way I'm using the boat is not a militaristic, jingoistic, burn the boats and screw everyone. It's quite the opposite. I'm trying to speak to the people who are risk adverse, who self select out of ambition because they have not burned the things that are holding them back or that are calling them back. And for me, this little seemingly pagan symbol on the cover of my book is not that at all. It's a paper boat in a child's bathtub, and that was the boat that I needed to burn. The boat of the stigma of shame and poverty that would hold me back. For others, it's anxiety. It's like I'm an anxious person and I need a backup plan. So now, big picture, what's my mission with this book? We as parents, when you have kids, you hand down to them this implicit message that it's not safe. It's not safe. You need a backup plan. And what science and studies show that when you actually tell somebody else that they need a backup plan, what they say consciously here, you don't trust me. You don't believe I can pull it off. And we do this to our kids unwittingly. And it's because we think we're protecting them, and what we're really doing is undermining them. And so part of my mission with the book is to say, for those who self-select out of ambition because you are, quote, not risk takers, where we're all risk wanters. We're just, some of us feel like we're not risk takers. There is a system to process risk at the beginning of the journey before you fully commit, that if you go through that process like I do each time, you will steel yourself for the journey so that you're not looking over your shoulder the whole time. So the book, big picture, tries to prove historically, scientifically, psychologically, and through case studies that actually having a backup plan that you're holding at the same time as you're planning is the very reason why you are stuck.
So, Matt, let's just pretend someone was actually already working towards their dream, right? And they're actually having a really hard time doing it. They spent years of like going after their dream, giving it like their all. What would you tell them after like 2 or 3 years and basically getting no traction in their business? What would you say to them?
So this is where the argument falls apart, or people try to, which I love this debate, right? Like, oh, Matt, but that doesn't make sense. That's the definition, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again when it's not working. I was like, well, that's not what I'm saying. Actually, I'm saying you burn the boats for goals, not tactics. Oftentimes, when I hear a person who's got a business they're pursuing, and it's just like a stupid idea, or it's a losing idea, or it's not worth their time, they hold on to it so desperately because they think that's their plan A, without zooming out. I'm always zooming out, and be like, is that business really your plan A, or was your plan, what was your plan A? Freedom. Your plan A was to tell your boss F you, or your plan A was to leave a better life for your kids because you grew up in desperate circumstances. Like, most people's plan A is not the tactic of a manifestation of a business or an idea. It's actually the broader goal, but because they don't have this framework, they hold on so desperately. So when people reject it to me, that's one reason. Well, you're saying keep staying at it. I'm like, no. Be rigid in your vision, be rigid in your why, but definitely flexible in your tactics and your execution. But also, number two, the I I'm not saying don't process risk. I process risk all the time. What I'm saying is by simultaneously holding the thought here of the backup plan and your plan A, always being like, all right, if this meeting goes shitty today or the investor won't write the check, I'll just go do the plan B. That's what I'm talking about. And when you go through your risk process, and we can go through the 4 questions I ask, then you won't do that. And why does that matter? Because studies show that merely contemplating a plan B while you're trying to pursue plan A takes enough energy away from the heroic effort you need to achieve your outlandish dreams. Just that energy leakage is enough to, one, ensure that you're less likely to achieve it, but also it saps your motivation. And the reason why we actually conjure a plan B is not out of prudence. It's to relieve the psychological pain of wanting something so effing bad. That is actually it's called. It's psychological relief, not prudence. And here's why. If I ask anybody, all right, if whatever it is you're pursuing, you want to be the next Taylor Swift, or you want to be the next Messi, whatever your dream is, right? If that doesn't work out, what are you going to do? Within 7 seconds, they will be able to tell me the soul killing job they will take at X amount of hour that they have no doubt they can get. Because every one of us, if we have bold dreams, we are capable of protecting the downside enough to get 3 square meals a day. And that's the part where I go to parents. I'm like, why are you telling your kid like you need to be an accountant? You don't think they're going to figure out, once their life strips them of all their happiness and joy, the shitty job they need to take? Like, if you ask me, I know if everything falls apart tomorrow, I'm like, all right, I know what I'll do. I guess I got to go take that bar exam.
Yeah, right. I don't think you have to worry about it, my friend. Now, Matt, I loved you on Shark Tank. You seem like the most genuine, kind person who is actually giving people feedback rather than just like verbally bashing them. Everybody seems to be playing a character there, and you actually came out to be just like yourself. Like, what made you go that route? And like, how did you end up doing that and just coming off so good like that?
I love you saying that because the best piece of advice actually Kevin O'Leary gave to me is like, don't try to be one of us, be you. Don't try to be an amalgam or I don't because most guests be like, which shark am I? And the producers do the opposite. Like, there's no attempt to make you anything you want. I appreciate you saying that. I wasn't sure who I am would come out, and I feel like it did in the show, which is amazing. It's not a lot, you don't get a lot of hits to make it come out over a couple of seasons, but I do feel like I was able to be my authentic self.
Now, I'm dying to know, and I'm sure everybody who watches this will be dying to know, how did you get on Shark Tank? What was that journey like for you? Now, you're ultra qualified, of course, but so are hundreds, if not thousands, of other people that are probably on a waiting list somewhere. But somehow you got accepted, you got onto Shark Tank, you made a huge difference and an impact in people's lives. How did you get on there? Obviously, you did something to will that into reality. Tell me what you did and how that journey was.
So back to the burn the boats thing, and it's a combination of a couple of principles. Let me try not to make this too abstract, but it starts with the simple question I ask myself at least once a week, maybe more. And it's borrowed from a zoning context. You know this because you read the book, but for those who haven't, it's the highest and best use. In zoning, the goal of zoning is to ensure that a piece of property doesn't sit fallow or underutilized as life changes. And so there's this highest and best use to make sure that each piece of land is put into production for its current context. So a warehouse in Tribeca, which was a slaughterhouse to kill cows in 100 years ago, is now, I always joke, Leonardo DiCaprio's bachelor pad, right? Or whatever. So I treat myself like a piece of land, and I apply the same rigor of a zoning analysis to myself every week. And I say, what's the highest and best use of Matt Higgins now? So why is that important? Because it ensures that you're constantly leveling up, that you're constantly reassessing what are you capable now that you weren't capable before, because we are iterative little creatures, right? And so every new experience that I do enables me to go a little bit further. So back to Shark Tank, I love the show. I bond with my son, and I was watching one time, and he always got a kick out of Kevin O'Leary's royalty deals, and I was like, it's not real, by the way. Like, in real world, people aren't giving you 5% on there. But we were sitting together one time, and I was like, Dad could be on Shark Tank. Like, I'm a shark. And he was like, yeah, right. There's no application on the internet. I have a wonderful agent named Reed Bergman, who ended up actually working for Gary and I at our agency VaynerMedia. And he was like, you have what it takes to be a shark. And actually, I don't talk about this a lot. Martha Stewart was the first one to plant the idea in my head. We were on a panel together years before, and Martha finishes like, you are so good. You should be a shark on Shark Tank. You have what it takes. So I owe Martha Stewart for the planting this very grandiose idea in my head. Absurd. But then I worked for a year of my life, and people who love to bullshit be like, I didn't try to get on. They called me. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, you didn't do any work. You didn't go to rooms in LA and have to completely compromise your self-respect to, like whatever. But anyway, there were multiple sessions of that meeting with different people. Sony owns the show, ABC is a constituent. Anyway, it took a year, and then I got on, and I talk in the book about all the different vulnerabilities I had to overcome to put myself out there. I was 50 pounds overweight. I have terrible posture, so I put a buzzer on my neck to make myself sit up because I was worried I would slouch in the chair and my stomach would hang out. I had but anyway, I share all those little cringy details to show, like, if you watch me on the show, and I say this as a product, not self-aggrandizing, but to make the point, you might think I was a natural at it, right? I'm a communicator, right? But I was like, I'm doing is a disservice to anybody who saw the episode, because they'd be like, well, that's not me. But if you read in the book, you're like, man, that's a total like head case. He was freaked out the night before. He was going to pretend he had food poisoning. I'll tell the whole story about imposter syndrome. And I would say to anyone out there, if you perpetuate the fraud that when you reach a certain level of success, you have all your shit figured out, you are not making good use of your success. The better use of your success is to pull back the curtain and show that humans progress and regress. And I often say I wrote my book so I would read my book. My book is my accountability partner. It's an act of commiserating with the audience and the reader. It's not an attempt to sort of hand that down. So that was a long way of saying how I got on Shark Tank, but it's about that simple formula of saying, what's the highest and best use of you? Asking the question. Then the second question is, what can I do today that brings me closer to my ultimate vision that I couldn't do yesterday? And so everything you do is a byproduct of what you did yesterday that gave you permission to go a little further, a little further. the Shark Tank, if I had never been an investor and partnered with Gary Vaynerchuk, built companies, helped support Resi and incubate Resi, and we sold to Amex, all this, I would have no credentials. But once I did, and I proved myself a great investor, the guy who used to run the two NFL teams that I did, Jets and he's not on Shark Tank. The guy used to be a reporter. The guy who helped oversee the World Trade Center, he's not on Shark Tank. But the person who helped build those companies gets to be on Shark Tank. The person who got to be on Shark Tank, who did these other things, had permission to have a conversation with Harvard Business School to maybe try to be on the faculty of HBS. Like, so that's why I say to anyone out there, it's also a great way to ensure that you're living in a perpetual growth mindset and to always ask the question. It's uncomfortable because if you want to sit down and watch Netflix, and eat popcorn, like, don't ask the question. But if that's not the life you want, ask the question.
Matt, you're right. Imposter syndrome is like a real thing. Everybody feels it. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO all the way down to entry level positions at any company, or if you're a new founder or whatever you're trying to actually do, you feel like you're incompetent. The only way past it is by doing the work you feel like you're unqualified to do until you feel like you're qualified to do it. It's a mind trick for yourself. And the spotlight effect is something that's also real, I feel. Again, everybody thinks everybody else is looking at them when they walk in the room. If that's what everybody thinks, that means they're all thinking this the same thing as you are. So when you walk into a room and you think all eyes are on you, they are for like a second, maybe a minute at most. And then they move on to worrying about themselves again. So when you bump into something that's like resistance, the thing that's holding you back from like trying something new, like Netflix distracting you, or your cell phone distracting you, or your loved ones distracting you, you got to get into a zone and you got to focus, because the things that are scaring you the most, the things you are putting off the most, are probably the things that are going to help you grow and actually become the person you actually are supposed to be. What do you think about that, Matt?
And now we're getting a little meta, but I would say to anyone, and it's fun to do, analyze the sort of collective presentation from gurus of the redemption story, and you'll see there's always an arc. I had ego, or I whatever, or I misjudged, I then stumbled, I have risen again, let me share. Everyone wants to put the the foibles and the failures and the fallibility in the rearview mirror, and when they're presenting it forward. And I think it's may way more useful to be like, here's me on TV, here's the reality, because that's real life. And I would just say it's very subtle, but I know somebody who receives that message, like you just said, like they're thinking like, well, that's not me. You've got to figure it out. Good for you. I'll buy your book and take your class. But I wanted to try to do something a little bit different. I wanted there to be no redemption in the end. Mom still dies. I'm still not over it. You know what I mean? Like Shark Tank, you would think, oh, he's wealthy. Why would he be worried about it? I still was. It makes no sense. And to your point about, I've been thinking about this a lot too, trying to isolate the areas in my life where I'm being oppositional, for which I actually have no choice, and try to take away my free will more than give myself free will. So like you were saying, you have a panel, right? Burn the boats, and then, but also use free will is for, and burn the boats is for areas that require creativity and breakout success. Atomic habits is for areas where requires repetition. So I am now constantly auditing an obligation and saying, is that something for which I truly have no choice? Then I should impose a super ego that says you have no choice. Like you're in prison. Like you're doing that. And I think that actually makes things a little bit easier, is to toggle between these two systems of, don't be oppositional for that which is already inevitable that you've decided, and be oppositional for that for which requires breakout success. Resist habits for that type of work. And that's what really Burn the Boat speaks to, is the areas that don't require or don't actually manifest through repetition and habit making.
Now, Matt, when you say be consistent and show up, what kind of showing up are you talking about? Like in Atomic Habits, where they tell that story about the guy that actually shows up to the gym but doesn't work out because he wants to become a guy that actually goes to the gym. That's actually a gym goer, right? But he just shows up, gets dressed for the gym, goes to the gym, doesn't work out, comes back, does this a few times, eventually gets there, works out for 5 minutes, leaves, and he eventually grows into this like habit around going to the gym. He's now a guy that goes to the gym and works out, but he took it step by step. Now, is that the kind of showing up, the consistency of showing up you're talking about? Or is there a different type of showing up you're referring to that got you onto Shark Tank?
I love Atomic Habits, but if you sort of dissect what it's really sort of saying, it's like trying to hack the codes around habit making so that you could string up a series of repetitive actions, right? Like anyone knows, like for example, just make it easier. If I want to lose weight, and I've always battled my weight my whole life, I simply have to enter everything I eat into my fitness pal. The mere act of that, studies show, will do most of the work. I have to walk 10,000 steps a day and I lift 5 times a week. That's it. Better if I don't revisit whether I should do those things every day, right? I should just be like, listen, face, like a 30 answer. Like, why are you even debating it with me? Whoever that super ego is. Burn the boats, though, is for things like, man, I want to be on Shark Tank. There's no repetition, no habit that gets you on Shark Tank. There's no habit that gets you on Harvard Business School. Now we could use hindsight bias to say, well, yes, it's your habit of like trying really hard. That's not a habit. So I've been meditating more about these two different motivational systems and try to take away free will where free will is useless.
Right? Imposter syndrome's a real thing. Everybody gets it. Doesn't really matter what level you're at. We still all feel it. But with that said, like in theory, we are imposters if we're doing something new. So until we're good at it, until we start doing it on a regular basis and show up consistently doing that thing, we are imposters until we are no longer imposters. And a lot of the time, we're mostly imposters in our own head. Nobody knows how new we are at it. We might stumble or stammer here and there, but nobody really knows if we're like experts or not. If we can talk the talk, we can walk the walk, we can move forward and actually do this with grace in a smart way. And it's okay to be new at something.
I love that. I say that all the time. I say, actually, if you want to really understand it, there's a cousin of imposter syndrome called the, interloper, right? You're an interloper into a new context, either technically or, metaphorically, but therefore you are an imposter because you haven't done it yet. I was an imposter on Shark Tank. So people who either you're a sociopath or, God gave you tremendous level of self-possession that you don't have it. The rest of us do. Unfortunately, women acknowledge it more than men, which I also think is a lie. So, it tends to be something because they're just, I find more honest about it. But I wanted to spark a conversation about it with the book.
I have my own saying that actually applies to this right now. Basically, it says, show up where you don't belong because one day you will. That was pinned to my profile for the longest time. The reason why I like it so much is that we are often the harbingers of our own like demise. We think we don't fit in. We think we don't like aren't supposed to be somewhere when really everybody's worried about themselves. So show up where you feel like you don't belong, and eventually they'll accept you because you're adding value. As long as you add value along the way, you're going to be totally fine. So again, show up where you don't belong because one day you will.
That's what Damon was. That's what Damon was. Why Damon John told me, you are here because you belong here because you are here. There is no arbiter of belonging in the universe. There is none. In almost in 95% of the situations and places you're going to be, there is no final arbiter. You just sort of show up and everybody's like, who invited you? First is like, now it's weird energies change. And after a while, you're part of the energy.
So Matt, I know you're friends with Gary Vaynerchuk. Tell me how that relationship works. Are you an investor? I know you're a New York Jets fan and also helped, we're running the New York Jets at some point. And Gary V just actually happens to be the biggest Jets fan of all time. He wants to own the New York Jets. Tell me how that relationship goes. Is he an investor? Is he part of a company? Are you guys just friends? Like, how does that relationship all work?
Yeah, the quick Gary Vee, not to repeat the whole thing, but I met Gary at a bagel store when I was running the New York Jets, and we kind of cut a deal to give him 8 Jets tickets to make the New York Jets the first client of Gary Vaynerchuk. The Nets try to take credit for that too, but I definitely was first. So the Jets I was. And then when I partnered up with Stephen Ross, who's an amazing entrepreneur, went back and acquired a significant minority stake in the firm. And to this day, we are the only partners in the firm, and the firm is now massive, worldwide, employees in Asia, over 2,000 employees. But I was there from day one with a few Jets tickets.
That is amazing. What a great story you got there.
It really is. I mean, what's funny about it though? Like, there's not a single aspect of how it's all played out that I didn't think it would play out like that. And it's not because I'm Nostradamus. It was just sort of the writing was there. Gary, great ability to predict, works hard. It all kind of made sense. So I could pretend like, oh gosh, can't believe we're here. But I thought we'd be here. I thought he'd be here. Forget about me.
Yeah, I really like Gary because I really think he's a good template to follow because he takes a lot of risks and he doesn't really care what people think of him. And the one message I got from him over the years, especially, is promote yourself or work for someone who promotes themselves. And, everything we try that's new, kind of like this, me in this video podcast and you, Matt, like This is one of my first, I would say, one of my first 7 podcasts on video. I'm not used to it. I'm getting used to cutting and editing and all these things that actually have to go with this. Also, having amazing guests like yourself. Like, this is tough for me too to figure out. But guess what? I'm doing it. It's crazy uncomfortable. But these are the things that help you grow. And if you don't do these things, if you're not putting yourself in uncomfortable positions like this right here, you're gonna actually stay where you are. And a year from now, you're gonna be like, how come I haven't moved? I haven't progressed. I haven't done anything. The only way to progress is to actually do things that make you feel uncomfortable, make you feel nervous. That's the direction you need to go in, and go in full force. Kind of like burn the boats, right? Abandon plan B and go all in on your dream. And you know what? Here I am doing that.
No, no, but first of all, you ask great questions. Number one. Number two, when I first started stepping out a little bit, especially around Shark Tank, it was and being more, more available on Instagram. I received a lot of hate behind my back because at the time CEOs and leaders weren't really stepping out, and I had to block it out because I was skating to where the puck was going. To invoke Wayne Gretzky, like I knew that it would become table stakes that leaders have to show up, obviously, right? That people connect with humans.
Matt, I totally agree. People fall in love with people, not brands. So if you look at like Elon Musk, he has way more followers on social media than all of his companies put together. The same thing with Richard Branson, the same thing with Mark Zuckerberg, same thing with Bill Gates. People don't care about the sterile companies doing work, basically building the future for us, but it's utility. They fall in love with the personality, the brand, the thing that they can relate to, which is another human being. People fall in love with people, not brands.
I still find even students who are looking to start a company but don't feel they're like I'm on TikTok but I don't use it, or I don't create anything. There's still a majority of people who have an idea or a dream still feel uncomfortable doing it, and I get that. There are times when there isn't an inauthenticity to it all for me doing it, and I'm doing it because it's what you do, and it it's hard. And then when I'm connecting with somebody genuinely, it feels good. But the reality is you have no choice. But what you're doing now, you're going through the process. It requires starting to feel like I have something worthwhile to say, like there's an authenticity.
Matt, what are some of the top takeaways from your book that you'll want people to like walk away from this interview and then have them go and purchase the book, either on Audible or actually at the bookstore, wherever you want them to purchase it, right? What are those takeaways you actually kind of want to communicate here? Give them like a little taste of like what it is so they can go finish reading or listening to it somewhere else.
I think a couple of things. It depends on what your framework, but I think it's about opportunity because uh, we are often the ones that dismiss our own insights precisely because they're our own. And one of my favorite pieces of writing is from Emerson. I return to Emerson all the time throughout my life, but the number one thing I return to, read like 100 times, is this essay called Self Reliance, and it talks about the indignity of being forced to accept your ideas from another after you dismiss them because they were your own. So anyone out there remembers watching infomercials, or and middle of the night you're like, wait, I had the idea for the potty, whatever, the one from Shark Tank, yeah, Squatty Potty, or you know what I mean, like we've all experienced a product that we also thought about, and those are very important insights. You shouldn't be like, oh man, like somebody else did it. It's like, no, you still didn't know they did it, and you invented it in your mind. That's confirmation. And so opportunity, and I would say, arrives before the tipping point of evidence, right? And you have to train your mind to act on opportunity before the tipping point of evidence. Most of us, because we are insecure, or or frankly, sometimes we're lazy. We have a spontaneous insight that we think are like, wow, this could be like a business or a promotion or whatever, a different way of doing things, and then we seek out evidence to support it, to give us permission, because we're told to believe that evidence is what makes things go right. And typical process is like, all right, I had an epiphany, now I'm trying to validate it. I asked my friend Bob. Maybe Bob's not the right person in your corner. Maybe you have a spouse who's just unhappy with you, so chooses to fight on this ground, to undermine your idea, whatever it is. And then we abandon them because we couldn't find the validation. And I argue in the book that the best businesses, innovations, decisions in life are actually gut sandwiches. They begin with intuition, and we attempt to support them with a layer of data. that shows that we're directionally correct. But at the end of the night, the green light comes from intuition. If you think about Steve Jobs pulling out his iPod because he wanted to carry the Beatles in his pocket, like it would have been easier to just iterate on the Walkman and have 20 songs instead of 10. But he had an intuition that there were millions of people like him who wanted to carry their Beatles in their back pocket. And Airbnb, like I said before, the sharing economy. So the most important, I'm trying to demystify what breakout success looks like and actually lower the bar. My whole life is about lowering the bar to taking action. And the whole burn the boats philosophy and this idea of highest and best use and sort of just figure it out is an attempt to lower the bar. When I teach at Harvard Business School, and I always ask some of the best entrepreneurs in the country, what do you want to tell to the version of yourself? A lot of them had gone to Harvard Business School, but you have a whole room of 100 of the brightest minds. What do you want to tell them? It's like Family Feud when survey says 90% say the same thing. You know what they say? I wish I could go back and tell me, like, trust yourself that you'll just figure it out. And they always have the same version of that message. And what they're trying to say is like, I worried too much and tried too hard to substantiate the thing that was impossible to substantiate. And in fact, the number one thing I should have been working on is my belief that I will just figure it out. So anybody listening, lower the bar, do the next best thing that moves you closer, due north in the general direction of your ambition, and put yourself in situations where you don't have anything more than the next two moves figured out. I wanted to teach at Harvard Business School, and I was like, I don't know if I can teach if I'm any good, but first I'll get the right to teach, then I'll figure it out. I wanted to write a book, right? But I was like, shit, I never wrote a book before. I was like, well, first I have to get permission to write the book, or else I won't even have a debate. And I think a lot of people revert to incrementalism because it feels very soothing. Like, first I'll get the job as a consultant at McKinsey, then I'll learn business, then I'll revisit this idea I had 3 years ago, not realizing by then I'll have two kids and I'll be way more risk adverse. You know what I mean? So I know I'm giving like 5 takeaways, but
Don't worry about it. The more takeaways, the better, Matt. So, what do you think about the people that like? I think the regret is like probably the biggest thing that people like are working with later in life, like at the sunset of their life, like 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think, the biggest regrets are like the things they don't do, the things that scared them and they just didn't pull the trigger on. I was having a conversation with my father a few months back, and I basically asked him, I'm like, hey, like, what is the one thing or two things that you actually regret in life? And he never had regrets. He told me he was a guy without regret. But at that moment, he basically said, I wish I would have bet on myself sooner. So he was a very successful businessman. He actually got promoted all the time, became like a consultant, left that job at like 45, and then started a whole new career. And in that career, like he found himself. Like that's the thing he should have been doing the whole time. And that is his regret, saying, I always wanted to do this. I didn't have the guts to do it. I cared about the paycheck. I cared about paying the bills and all that stuff a little too much. Should have had more confidence in myself to just do it and then know I was going to figure it out along the way. So that's his biggest regret. And I think that's pretty common. What do you think about that?
that's great. And I think that's actually pretty typical for people. And there's a great book written by a hospice nurse, and she asked people the five regrets of the dying. And like, I think number one was living someone else's life. And that's why now, to get really deep, but that's why I have this app on my phone called We Croak. Is a plug for an app for which I never met the creators. I'm waiting for them to reach out to me since all I do is plug them. But and if 5 times a day it reminds me that I'm going to die, the little note comes up, hey, reminder, you are going to die. It makes me laugh. And then I open the quote, and the quote's always some poetic, beautiful way to talk that is meant to zoom me into the present. And the reason why mortality is so important, because when you hold mortality in your hands every day throughout the course of your day, you will minimize the likelihood, like you were saying about your dad, that you'll defer. You'll be like, you know what? And also, the stakes aren't that high. Very little is meaningful against the juxtaposition of imminent death. The things that remain meaningful are personal joy, love of another, you know what I mean? Integrity, peaceful. Very little holds up. And it's very important, I think, to pressure test all the shit we think about all the time and against the prospect of imminent death, because today might be your last day.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, let's be honest, we could walk outside right now and get literally run over without looking, or it could just be you just never wake up. So there's no doubt you should take opportunity while you have it.
Literally, and well, that's why it was a great gift of having cancer. I honestly think that cancer is an amazing gift that I had.
Wait, you had cancer and you're just bringing it up now? Can you talk more about that? Because cancer's no joke. Like, how did you go through that and beat that at the time? Like, that is another enormous task to take on while you're doing all these other things.
I had testicular cancer when I was 33. I just had my little baby boy. It was like a bomb went off. He was only 3 months old. I had a terrible pain in my right groin, and then like had my right testicle cut off within 48 hours, and they thought it had spread significantly. So it was a period of like, wow. And my greatest thought was, aside from like really zeroing on what I wanted my life to be about. But my greatest thought was like, all the shit I think about does not hold up against the prospect of imminent death, because I might actually be dying. And the brownstones in the New York Times real estate section, the nicer car I'm really trying to get, the promotion, the contract at work, blah blah, they don't hold up. And yet technically, imminent death is hanging over me right now like a guillotine. But I wasn't aware of it until I got the diagnosis. And so that, once I survived, great, try to pull it forward, because it's very hard to hold on to, because it's hard to be vested in this institutions that are around us, and accolades and the credit. Like, it's hard to be vested in the system if you look at death negatively, because you'll be like, what's the point? But if you look at death as a way to connect with the gift of the present, sitting in the car. Well, I used to call it zero time. Like, who gives a shit about the brownstones? But the present is beautiful. Then it actually is very empowering. And it's not. People think it's very negative. It's the opposite. It's why the happiest people on earth live in Bhutan, because they think about death 5 times a day.
5 times a day is a lot, my friend. So thanks for being on the show. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I know you're a really busy guy. So thanks again for being here. Now, where could people like find your book? Like, should they go on Audible? Should they go on Amazon? Like, where do you want them to find your book? And like, where are you on the internet? Are you like mostly on Instagram? Are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? Like, where do you want people to message you?
The easiest way to find the book is on Amazon. I actually did something fun and innovative, which in another year would look completely common. But I trained an AI model on everything to do with the burn the boats philosophy, the military instances, every study I mentioned in the book, deeper into that. Also, every interview I've done. And I trained an AI model called Triton. And the name of Triton is the son of Poseidon, who's had the power to calm the seas. So if you read the book and you feel like the inspiration you had starts to wane, or you have a big interview, you can go in and try and say, hey, I got a big interview tomorrow. I'm feeling anxious. What should I do about it? And it will talk to you in the voice of the book and me in an amalgam. It's pretty damn cool. So, and that's at burntheboatsbook.com. So either go to Amazon, burntheboatsbook.com. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram under M. Higgins, where I spend a lot of time. Thanks for doing it. By the way, keep at it. You ask great questions. Like, just keep doing it. Don't let anybody get in your head. Don't let anybody who's questioning you why you're doing it. Just say, shut the hell up. Worry about your own life.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that a lot. Like, coming from you, it means a lot.
All right, everyone. Lastly, if you read the book, I'm a human being. I have to resupply my energy every day and my motivation. I also take incoming. Like, why do you care so much? Your DMs, where you're telling me it made an impact on you, get me going another day. So if you want to pay it forward after you read the book and wish for me to keep evangelizing, send me a DM. I read every one of them.
Okay, you guys heard it here first. Matt wants you to reply and respond to him on Instagram. Go buy the book at amazon.com. Go listen to it on Audible. Whatever you're going to do, go get it. And until next time, Matt, great chatting with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone.